Hello guys, welcome to Percy Jackson. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto become the new god of Percy Jackson world? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The storm arrives. The sea churned violently under an otherwise cloudless sky. Waves crashed against the shore of Long Island with unusual ferocity, as if the ocean itself was trying to expel something foreign from its depths. The disturbance went unnoticed by most, except for a young man with sea-green eyes standing at the edge of Camp Half-Blood. Percy Jackson frowned, his hand instinctively moving to his pocket where Riptide rested. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the water, a disruption that didn't belong to his father's domain. Annabeth, he called over his shoulder. Something's coming. The blonde high-red daughter of Athena jogged down from the big house, her dagger already drawn. Monster. I don't think so, Percy replied, eyes fixed on a growing vortex of water about 50 yards offshore. It feels different, almost like when the gods appear, but not quite. The vortex intensified, water spiraling upward in a column that defied natural physics. Several other campers had noticed now, forming a defensive line along the beach. Chiron cantered down from the big house, his expression grim as he surveyed the phenomenon. Stand ready, the centaur instructed, but do not attack unless provoked. The column of water suddenly collapsed, and a blinding flash of golden light erupted from the spot. When the glare subsided, the campers saw something floating on the surface, a body. Percy didn't hesitate. He dove into the waves, propelling himself through the water with inherited skill. The body was face down, but alive, he could sense the life force struggling. Grabbing the stranger by the back of an unusual orange and black jacket, Percy pulled him toward shore. As they reached the shallows, other campers waded in to help. They dragged the unconscious figure onto the beach, Young keeping a cautious distance as they got their first good look at him. The young man appeared to be around 19 or 20, with spiky blonde hair and strange whisker-like markings on his cheeks. His clothing was foreign, nothing like Greek, Roman, or modern American styles. A peculiar metal headband with a spiral leaf symbol lay beside him, having come loose during his journey. "Is he a half-blood?" someone asked. Chiron stepped forward, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "I'm not certain. His aura is unusual." The stranger's eyes suddenly flew open, startling blue and alert despite his condition. He rolled instinctively, springing to his feet in a defensive stance that none of the campers recognized. His gaze darted quickly, assessing threats, exits, and positions with military precision. "Where am I?" he demanded, voice raspy but strong. "Who are you people?" Percy stepped forward, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "You're safe. This is Camp Half-Blood. I'm Percy Jackson." The blonde man's eyes narrowed slightly. Camp Half-Blood. His accent was strange, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Last thing I remember was fighting alongside my friends in the war." Then, his face clouded. Something tore open, like the fabric between worlds. Annabeth moved closer, curiosity overcoming caution. "You're not from this world." Before Naruto could answer, a low growl emanated from the forest edge. The campers turned to see three massive hellhounds emerging from the trees, their red eyes fixed hungrily on the newcomer. How did they get past the barriers? An Ares camper shouted, raising her spear. Percy uncapped Riptide, the pen expanding into a gleaming celestial bronze sword. "Doesn't matter. We need to." But Naruto was already moving. With a speed that left the demigod stunned, he dashed toward the hellhounds. No weapon, no armor, just bare hands and determined eyes. "Wait," Percy called. "You can't kill them without celestial bronze or..." The warning died on his lips as Naruto's hand began to glow with swirling blue energy. The air around it distorted like a miniature tornado compressed into a sphere. "Rasengan!" Naruto shouted, driving the energy sphere into the lead hellhound's chest. The monster didn't just disintegrate like when struck with celestial bronze, it was launched backward, its body spiraling like a corkscrew before exploding into golden dust 50 feet away. The other hellhounds hesitated, their bestial instincts registering something dangerous about this prey. Naruto didn't give them time to reconsider. His fingers formed unfamiliar signs in rapid succession. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a series of popping sounds and puffs of smoke, 3 identical copies of Naruto appeared beside him. The campers stared in disbelief. What kind of power is that? Annabeth whispered. It's not Greek. The Naruto clones attacked in perfect coordination, each engaging a Hellhound W. ITH taijutsu moves that were both precise and powerful. One clone delivered a devastating uppercut that sent a Hellhound flying, while another executed a spinning kick that caught the third monster in its jaw. The original Naruto leapt high, impossibly high, into the air, his hands again forming that strange energy sphere, but larger this time. Odama Rasengan. The massive spiraling sphere crashed down on the dazed Hellhounds, creating a crater in the earth and vaporizing both monsters instantly. The clones disappeared in puffs of smoke as Naruto landed gracefully in the center of the destruction, barely winded. Silence fell over the beach. The campers stared at this stranger who had dispatched 3 Hellhounds with powers none of them had ever seen before. Powers that weren't demigod abilities or magic as they knew it. Naruto turned to face them, his expression shifting from battle-ready to sheepish in an instant. He rubbed the back of his neck, an oddly disarming gesture from Som. One who had just displayed such combat prowess. Sorry about the mess, he said. Those weren't summoning animals I recognized, so I figured they weren't friendly. Chiron stepped forward, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. Young man, what exactly are you? Naruto blinked, as if the question surprised him. I'm a shinobi from Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves. A ninja, he clarified, noting their blank expressions, and, his face grew more serious, the Jinchuriki of the 9-tailed fox, Kurama. The words meant nothing to the gathered demigods, but the way he saw them, like they should explain everything, made it clear this was significant. Annabeth was the first to recover, her analytical mind already working. You said something tore open between worlds. Why? Oh, you think you've traveled between dimensions? Naruto frowned, considering this. Maybe. The battle against Kagaya involved a lot of space-time manipulation. And afterward, when we were releasing the infinite Tsukuyomi, he shook his head. It doesn't matter how. What matters is I need to get back. My friends might still be in danger. As he spoke, something strange happened. A faint golden glow began to emanate from his skin. Almost imperceptible at first, but growing steadily more visible. Naruto himself didn't seem to notice, but Chiron's eyes widened. By the gods, the centaur murmured. It's happening here. What's happening? Percy asked, but the answer came in a form none of them expected. The air above Naruto shimmered, and 3 ancient women appeared, floating, spectral, yarn and scissors in their gnarled hands. The campers fell to their knees instinctively. Even Percy and Annabeth, who had faced gods and titans, felt the primal need to show deference. The fates, Chiron whispered. Naruto alone remained standing, looking up at the 3 women with confusion rather than fear. Who are you, Ba-chan? He asked, using a Japanese term for elderly women that mad. Several campers wince at its casualness. The middle fate spoke, her voice like dry leaves rustling. Naruto Uzumaki, child of prophecy from a world not our own. The threads of fate rarely cross dimensions. Yet yours has intertwined with our tapestry. The youngest fate continued. A void exists in our pantheon. Balance disrupted. The old god of harmony fell in the Titan War, his essence scattered to the winds. The oldest fate finished. You, who united the tailed beasts and brought peace to your world, have been chosen to assume this mantle. The process has already begun. Naruto's eyes widened as he finally noticed the golden glow surrounding him. Wait, what? You're turning me into a god. I never agreed to that. I need to get back to my friends, to Konoha. The choice was made T. He moment you crossed the boundary between worlds, the fates spoke in unison. It is not a punishment, Naruto Uzumaki, but a necessity for both realms. Your world is healing without you. Ours requires what you bring. Before Naruto could protest further, the golden glow intensified. He gasped, dropping to one knee as power surged through him. The campers backed away as the air around him crackled with energy, part divine ichor, part chakra, the combination creating something entirely new. What's happening to me? Naruto ground out through clenched teeth. Inside his mind, he could feel Kurama stirring. The fox equally confused by the transformation. You are becoming the god of balance and harmony, the fates intoned. Your chakra, your connection to the Biju, your experience bridging divides, all make you uniquely suited to this role. The pantheon must be balanced. With that proclamation, the fates vanished, leaving Naruto surrounded by the golden glow. For a moment, he seemed to grow taller, his features more defined, his presence more commanding. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light receded, absorbed into his body. Naruto stood, looking outwardly the same except Ra's subtle change in his eyes. They now contained flecks of gold among the blue, like sunlight reflecting off ocean waves. That was intense, he muttered, checking himself over. I don't feel that different, though. Are you sure that worked, Datbeo? The casual phrase, a verbal tick from his youth that slipped out when he was nervous, seemed so at odds with what they had just witnessed that Percy couldn't help but laugh. The tension broke, and the other campers slowly rose to their feet, staring at Naruto with a mixture of awe, fear, and curiosity. Chiron approached cautiously. Lord Naruto, he began, using the formal address reserved for gods. Naruto immediately waved his hands. Whoa, no, just Naruto is fine. I'm not a lord of anything. Nevertheless, Chiron continued, what we have witnessed is unprecedented. A mortal from another world, ascending to godhood here. The Olympian Council must be informed. As if on cue, the sky darkened. Thunder rolled across the previously clear sky, and lightning flashed despite the absence of clouds. The campers looked up nervously. Zeus knows already, Annabeth said quietly. The king of the gods doesn't miss the birth of a new deity. Naruto frowned, looking at the sky with defiance rather than fear. Look, I appreciate the promotion or whatever, but I didn't ask for this. I need to find a way back to my own world, not get involved in your divine politics. Percy stepped forward. It's not that simple. The gods, they don't take kindly to being dismissed. Especially by other immortals. I'm not immortal, Naruto protested, but even as he said it, he could feel something different in his body, a resilience, a power flowing beneath his skin that hadn't been there before. Kurama's voice echoed in his mind. Kit, something has changed. Your chakra, it's mixing with something else. Something ancient and powerful. Before Naruto could respond to the fox, a brilliant flash of light appeared at the edge of the beach. The campers averted their eyes, knowing what it meant when light shone that brightly. When they looked back, a young woman stood there, auburn-haired and silver-eyed, dressed in hunting clothes. A silver bow was slung across her back, and she radiated a cool, moonlit power. Lady Artemis, Chiron bowed his head respectfully. The goddess's silvery eyes fixed on Naruto, studying him with ancient wisdom. So you're the disturbance Olympus is buzzing about. The Fates. New project. Naruto met her gaze evenly. Despite her youthful appearance, he could sense age and power behind those EYs. Like looking at a predator who had hunted for millennia. I didn't ask for any of this, he said simply. I was fighting to protect my friends one moment, and here the next. Artemis circled him slowly, like a wolf assessing potential prey. Yet the Fates chose you specifically. They don't act without purpose, even when that purpose is obscure to us. She stopped in front of him. The council has demanded your presence on Olympus. I've been sent to escort you. And if I refuse? Naruto asked, his voice calm but firm. A small, cold smile touched Artemis's lips. Then my brother Apollo would be sent next. Then Athena. Then Ares. The list continues until you either accept the invitation or are brought by force. The second option tends to be unpleasant. Naruto considered this, his mind racing through tactical options. In the ninja world, he would never willingly walk into the stronghold of unknown powers. But this wasn't his world, and these weren't his rules. Be careful, Kit, Kurama warned in his mind. These gods remind me of the Otsutsuki clan. Ancient, powerful, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. I'll go, Naruto decided aloud. But I want witnesses. He gestured to Percy and Annabeth. These two seem to understand your world better than I do. Artemis raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to make demands. Maybe not, Naruto replied with a shrug. But if you're bringing me to meet your leaders, I'd rather have advisors who can explain your customs. Unless you want me accidentally starting a divine war because I used the wrong fork at dinner. To everyone's surprise, Artemis laughed, a sound like silver bells that rarely graced the goddess's lips. You're either very brave or very foolish, Naruto Uzumaki. Perhaps both. She turned to Percy and Annabeth. Very well. The heroes of Olympus may accompany us. Their counsel has proven valuable before. Percy and Annabeth exchanged glances. They had stood before the gods many times, but never to introduce a brand new deity from another dimension. We'll need to be careful, Annabeth whispered to Percy. The gods will be divided on how to handle this. Some will see him as a threat, others as an opportunity. Yeah, Percy agreed, and something tells me Naruto isn't the bend the knee type. Artemis raised her hand, and a silver chariot appeared, pulled by deer whose antlers gleamed in the fading light. Come, the council awaits, and Zeus is not known for his patience. As they boarded the chariot, Naruto glanced back at Camp Half-Blood and the gathered demigods watching with wide eyes. This strange new world had thrust godhood upon him without consent, but if there was one thing Naruto Uzumaki had always done, it was turning impossible situations to his advantage. The chariot rose into the air, streaking toward the heart of the storm gathering over Manhattan, toward Mount Olympus and the judgment of gods who didn't yet know how much their world was about to change. The ascent to Olympus was nothing like Naruto had expected. The chariot soared above Manhattan, buildings shrinking below until they looked like toys. Then, impossibly, they approached the Empire State Building, not slowing as they neared its spire. Hang on, Artemis advised casually. Naruto gripped the chariot's edge as they passed through what appeared to be solid matter but felt like a cool mist against his skin. Reality shifted, and suddenly they were rising toward a mountain floating impossibly in the sky, a gleaming city of marble and gold perched atop it, radiating divine power. Welcome to Olympus, Percy said, noting Naruto's wide eyes. Home of the gods. Naruto had seen impressive sights before, the massive stone faces of the Hokage monument, the floating turret. La Island where he'd trained with Killer Bee, but this was different. This place existed in defiance of natural law, suspended by divine will alone. It's beautiful, he admitted, but a little excessive, don't you think? Annabeth smiled faintly. Gods aren't known for subtlety. I should know. I redesigned parts of it after the Titan War. The chariot landed on a wide marble path leading to an enormous structure that dominated the mountaintop, a temple complex that dwarfed any building Naruto had ever seen. Massive columns soared upward, supporting a roof decorated with moving constellations. The entire structure radiated power so intensely that it almost hurt to look at directly. The Hall of the Gods, Artemis explained, dismissing her chariot with a wave. Where the Olympian Council meets. As they approached the massive bronze doors, Naruto could feel the atmosphere growing heavier with power. It reminded him of standing near the Ten Tails during the war, that same sense of primal force barely contained. Inside, the hall stretched impossibly large, its ceiling opening to the night sky above. 12 massive thrones arranged in a U-shape dominated the room, each uniquely designated and sized for beings much larger than humans. Most were already occupied by figures that radiated power in different ways, some literally glowing, others causing the air around them to shimmer with heat or energy. At the head of the U sat a man with a neatly trimmed beard, wearing a pinstriped suit that somehow looked both modern and ancient. His eyes crackled with lightning as he studied the newcomers. The throne beside him held a beautiful woman with calculating eyes, a regal crown upon her head. Zeus and Hera, Annabeth whispered to Naruto. King and Queen of Olympus. Artemis guided him to the center of the room before growing in size until she matched the other gods, taking her seat on a silver throne decorated with images of the moon and hunt. Percy and Annabeth knelt respectfully in the center of the hall. Naruto remained standing, earning disapproving murmurs from several of the gods. Zeus's voice rumbled like distant thunder. You stand before the Olympian Council, newcomer. Kneel. Naruto's blue-gold eyes met the God King's storm-gray ones without flinching. Where I come from, we show respect to leaders who've earned it through their actions. I'll be polite, but I won't kneel until I understand what's happening and why I was brought here against my will. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. A muscular god with cruel eyes and a brutal crew cut, Ares. Naruto guessed from the weapons adorning his throne, leaned forward eagerly. Let me teach him some manners, father, Ares growled, hand moving to the sword at his side. Peace, Ares, said another god, handsome, with golden hair and a radiant smile. Our guest is newly divine. He hasn't yet learned our ways. This must be Apollo, Artemis's twin brother. Zeus raised a hand for silence. Artemis, explain why you've brought mortals to this meeting. The goddess of the hunt inclined her head. The new god requested witnesses familiar with our customs, father. Given the unusual nature of his arrival, I deemed it a reasonable precaution. A goddess with intense gray eyes and an owl perched on her throne, Athena, studied Naruto with clinical interest. This is unprecedented. The fates themselves intervening to elevate a mortal from another dimension. What power could he possess that warranted such an exceptional measure? That's what I'd like to know, Naruto said. 1 minute I'm in my world. The next I'm washing up on a beach with 3 creepy old ladies telling me I'm becoming a god. I didn't sign up for this. Zeus's eyes narrowed dangerously. You speak as if godhood is a burden rather than an honor. It is a burden, came a quiet voice from a modest throne decorated with grapevines. A god with curly black hair and bloodshot eyes regarded Naruto with surprising sympathy. One not all of us would have chosen freely. Isn't that right, father? The wine god, Dionysus, Naruto recalled from Annabeth's whispered identifications, was the only Olympian who didn't. She regarded him with suspicion or open hostility. Zeus ignored his son's comment. According to the fates, you have been chosen to fill the vacant position of god of balance and harmony. Ether fell during the Titan War. His essence scattered so thoroughly even we could not restore him. And you need this position filled so badly you had to kidnap someone from another dimension. Naruto asked skeptically. The fates did not consult us. Hera spoke for the first time, her voice regal and cold. Had they done so, we might have suggested a more suitable candidate. Suitable meaning obedient, Percy muttered. Just loud enough for Naruto to hear. Zeus either didn't hear or chose to ignore the comment. Nevertheless, what's done is done. You now possess divine ichor, Naruto Uzumaki, mixed with your strange mortal energy. The question before this council is what to do with you. Send me home, Naruto said immediately. My friends need me. My village. Impossible, Athena interrupted. The dimensional barrier the fates breached to bring you here has already resealed itself. Even we gods cannot tear through the fabric of reality on a whim. Naruto's heart sank. He thought of Sakura, Sasuke, Kakashi, and all the others. Would they think he'd died in the final battle? Or disappeared mysteriously? Would they search for him forever, never knowing what had happened? There must be a way, he insisted. His voice tight with emotion. Perhaps, in time, Athena conceded. But for now, you are here, and a god, whether you wished it or not. The more pressing question is whether you will be an ally to Olympus. Or a threat. At this, Ares leaned forward again. I say we bind his power until we're certain of his loyalty. A new god with foreign abilities. Too dangerous to leave unchecked. For once, I agree with Ares, said a beautiful goddess whose appearance kept shifting subtly, becoming more alluring each time Naruto looked away. Aphrodite, goddess of love. Though for different reasons, this one has potential, but needs refinement. You speak of him as if he were a weapon to be forged, objected a god with sea-green eyes like Percy's, Poseidon, the sea god and Percy's father. The fates chose him for a reason. Perhaps we should listen before we judge. Naruto felt a surge of gratitude toward the sea god, whose reasonable tone was a welcome respite from the hostility and suspicion. I agree with my uncle, Apollo chimed in. Besides, I'm getting some interesting prophecy vibes from this situation. The fates don't intervene directly without good reason. Zeus considered his son's words with a slight frown. Very well, Naruto Uzumaki, tell us of your world and your powers. Help us understand why the fates might have chosen you. Naruto took a deep breath. He'd never been great at explanations, but he knew this was important. Where I come from, we don't have gods like you. We have shinobi, ninja, who use chakra to perform jutsus, techniques, he clarified, seeing their confusion. Chakra is energy that flows through all living things, a combination of physical and spiritual power. He went on to explain the basics of his world, the hidden villages, the great wars. the threat of the Akatsuki and Madara, and finally the battle against Kagaya. He described the tailed beasts and his role as a Jinchuriki, host to the nine-tailed fox. Rama, that's the fox's name, and I are partners now, he explained. We work together instead of fighting each other. And during the war, I connected with all the tailed beasts, helping them cooperate for the first time in centuries. So you're a unifier, Athena observed. One who bridges divides between ancient powers. I guess you could say that, Naruto agreed. I believe in finding understanding between people, even enemies. That's my ninja way. And these tailed beasts, Zeus inquired, they are similar to our titans. Ancient, primordial powers. Similar, maybe, but not exactly the same, Naruto replied. They were created from the 10 tails by the Sage of 6 Paths, who split its chakra into 9 different beings to prevent it from destroying the world. The gods exchanged meaningful glances at this information. Creating sentient beings from the essence of a greater power was familiar to them. Many minor gods and spirits had been born this way. And this power of yours, chakra, it allows you to create copies of yourself, as you demonstrated at the camp. Athena asked. Naruto nodded. Shadow clones, yeah, and other techniques too. He raised his hand, forming a Rasengan to demonstrate. The swirling blue energy illuminated the hall, drawing gasps from several gods. This is pure chakra manipulation. The more advanced versions combine elemental natures. Fascinating, Athena murmured. Neither magic as we know it, nor divine power, yet effective against our monsters nonetheless. Ares leaned forward, his fiery eyes fixed on the Rasengan. Show us what else you can do, new god. I want to see this power in action. Zeus shot his son a warning look. Not here, Ares. The hall is not a training ground. Actually, Apollo interjected, I wouldn't mind a demonstration either. How else can we assess what role he might play in our pantheon? Zeus considered this, then nodded reluctantly. A controlled demonstration, then. Outside, the council adjourned a large courtyard adjacent to the hall. Marble columns surrounded an open area that might once have been a garden but now resembled a training ground. The gods arranged themselves in a semicircle, Percy and Annabeth standing nervously to one side. Don't worry, Percy whispered to Naruto. Just show them what you can do. But maybe not your most destructive stuff. They get touchy about power displays that might rival theirs. Naruto nodded his understanding, then stepped into the center of the courtyard. He started with the basics, taijutsu movements that demonstrated his speed and agility. Basic ninjutsu like the transformation technique that made the gods murmur with interest. Then he moved to more advanced techniques. Multiple shadow clones spread throughout the courtyard, each performing different tasks. He demonstrated a small Rasenshuriken, keeping it contained to avoid destroying the courtyard, and used Sage Mode briefly to show how he could gather natural energy. The gods watched with varying expressions, Ares with barely concealed envy, Athena with scholarly interest, Apollo with delight, and Zeus with growing concern. For his finale, Naruto closed his eyes, communing briefly with Kurama. When he opened them again, they had changed to slitted red ones, and an orange chakra cloak surrounded his body, forming 9 tails behind him. This is Kurama's power, he explained, his voice deeper and more resonant in this form. The 9 tails. We're partners, sharing our strength. The transformation sent a wave of energy across the courtyard so potent that even the gods felt it. This was no ordinary power. It was primal, ancient, and unmistakably divine in its own way, despite coming from another world. Enough, Zeus commanded, his voice sharp with unease. We have seen sufficient evidence of your abilities. Naruto released the 9 tails mode, returning to his normal appearance save for the golden flecks in his blue eyes, the mark of his new godhood. The gods returned to the council hall in silence, each processing what they had witnessed. Once seated, Zeus addressed Naruto again. Your powers are considerable, he acknowledged, and unlike any in our pantheon. I can see why the fates might have chosen you for the role of balance and harmony. The question remains, will you accept this role and swear loyalty to Olympus? Naruto considered his options carefully. He was trapped in this world for now, with no immediate way home. Making enemies of these gods seemed unwise, yet blindly pledging loyalty to rulers he barely knew went against everything he believed in. I will accept the role the fates gave me, he said finally. Balance and harmony are principles I've always fought for. But my loyalty has to be earned. I'll respect your authority as the established powers in this world. But I won't blindly follow orders I disagree with. That's not who I am. Murmurs broke out among the gods at this qualified acceptance. Ares growled in disapproval, while Apollo and Hermes exchanged amused glances. Bold, Poseidon commented, refreshingly honest, but bold. Zeus's expression darkened like storm clouds gathering. You speak as if you have a choice, newcomer. Gods who defy Olympus rarely prosper. Father, Athena interjected, perhaps a compromise. The new god is still learning our ways. Rather than demanding immediate fealty, we could assign him a probationary period. Let him grow into his role under supervision. Zeus considered this suggestion. And who would take responsibility for this supervision? I volunteer my camp, offered a goddess who had been quiet until now, Artemis. All eyes turned to her in surprise. My hunters travel widely, encountering many threats to balance and harmony. It would be an appropriate training ground for his new domain. And I can ensure he doesn't overstep. Naruto looked at Artemis with curiosity. Why would she offer this? Her silver eyes revealed nothing of her motivations. An interesting proposal, daughter. Zeus said, but your hunters accept no male companions. He would not join the hunt itself, Artemis clarified. Merely travel in parallel, learning from our encounters. My hunters can defend themselves should he prove problematic. Hera leaned toward her husband. It has merit, Zeus. Artemis is one of our most disciplined children. If anyone can maintain appropriate boundaries with this new god, it is she. After a long moment of consideration, Zeus nodded. Very well. Naruto Uzumaki, god of balance and harmony, you will spend one season with Artemis and her hunters, learning the ways of our world and your new domain. After that time, we will reconvene to assess your progress and determine your permanent place in our pantheon. He fixed Naruto with a stern gaze. But understand this. Any threat to Olympus, any abuse of your powers against our interests, will be met with the full might of this council. Are we clear? Naruto met his gaze steadily. Crystal. And I hope it works both ways. I'm not looking for trouble, but I won't be anyone's weapon or servant either. Zeus's mouth tightened at the implied condition, but he gave a curt nod. So be it. This council is adjourned until the winter solstice, at which point we will evaluate our newest colleague. The gods began to vanish one by one, some in flashes of light, others dissolving into mist or fire. Soon only Artemis remained, along with Percy, Annabeth, and Naruto. The huntress goddess reduced her size to human scale, approaching Naruto with measured steps. We leave at dawn, she stated simply. Be ready. For what? Naruto asked. A small, predatory smile touched her lips. For a crash course in godhood, shinobi. And a test of whether you truly embody the balance and harmony you claim to value. With that, she vanished in a shimmer of silver light, leaving Naruto alone with the two demigods. Well, Percy said after a moment of silence, that went better than I expected. No one tried to vaporize you. Always a good first meeting with the gods, Annabeth agreed with grim humor. But Naruto, be careful with Artemis. She's one of the more reasonable Olympians. But she's no fan of males in general. This arrangement, it's unusual. You think it's a trap? Naruto asked, the tactical part of his mind already analyzing angles and motivations. Annabeth shook her head. Not exactly. More like a test. The gods rarely do anything straightforwardly. There's always an agenda. Naruto sighed, feeling the weight of this new reality settling onto his shoulders. Politics. Some things are the same no matter what dimension you're in. As they made their way out of the now empty hall, Naruto glanced back at the 12 massive thrones. Somewhere in his mind, Kurama stirred. Interesting bunch, these gods, the fox observed. Powerful, yes, but fractured. Mistrustful, not unlike the shinobi world before you started changing things, Kit. You think that's why the fates brought me here? Naruto asked silently. To change the gods too? Who knows? Kurama replied. But if anyone could teach immortals about true harmony, it would be you. Outside, Olympus stretched before them, beautiful, ancient, and utterly foreign. Below, Manhattan glittered like stars fallen to earth. This world needed balance and harmony, Naruto could sense the discord beneath the surface. Perhaps this was a mission after all, just not one he'd chosen. So, he said to Percy and Annabeth as they waited for the elevator that would take them back to the mortal world. Tell me about these hunters I'll be traveling with. And why does their leader look at men like they're something she scraped off her shoe? Percy laughed nervously. That's a long story. You might want to sit down for this one. As the elevator doors closed behind them, Naruto realized that despite the absurdity of his situation, displaced to another dimension and suddenly made a god, he wasn't alone. He had Kurama, he had new potential allies in Percy and Annabeth, and he had his shinobi training and determination. Whatever this world had in store for him, Naruto Uzumaki, the newly minted god of balance and harmony, would face it head on. That was his ninja way, in this world or any other. Dawn broke over Camp Half-Blood, painting the Long Island Sound with hues of gold and crimson. Naruto stood at the edge of the forest, a small pack of borrowed supplies slung over his shoulder. He'd spent the night in the big house, listening to Chiron's explanations of this world's complicate mythology and trying to process everything that had happened. Sleep had been elusive. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of his friends back in Konoha, Sakura's determination, Sasuke's reluctant smirk, Kakashi's crinkled eye smile. Were they searching for him? Mourning him? Had time even passed the same way there? The questions haunted him. You need to focus on the present, Kit, Kurama advised. Worrying about what you can't change will only dull your edge. I know, Naruto replied silently. But it's hard not to think about them. The fates said your world was healing without you, the fox reminded him. Trust your friends. They're strong. Naruto nodded, drawing comfort from Kurama's practical wisdom. The fox had become more than a partner in battle. He was a friend and mentor in his own gruff way. The sound of approaching footsteps drew Naruto's attention. Percy and Annabeth were walking toward him, carrying additional supplies. Thought you might need these, Percy said, handing over a canteen of something that smelled sweet but unfamiliar. Nectar. It heals demigods, and probably gods too. Just don't give it to mortals, they'll literally burn up. And this, Annabeth added, offering a small pouch. Ambrosia squares. Same deal. Divine food, healing properties, deadly to mortals. Naruto accepted the gifts gratefully. Thanks. For everything. UTW. Didn't have to help a random stranger who washed up on your beach. Percy grinned. Are you kidding? Random stranger becomes God. Is actually pretty normal by our standards. At least you didn't try to kill us first. Which puts you ahead of half the immortals we've met. Percy, Annabeth chided, though a smile tugged at her lips. She turned to Naruto, her expression growing serious. Listen, about Artemis and the hunters. They're complicated. Man-haters, is what she's trying to say, Percy interjected. Well, man-avoiders at least. They swear off romantic relationships with men in exchange for immortality and hunting prowess. And Artemis is their leader, Naruto concluded. The goddess who's never had a male companion suddenly volunteers to babysit the new male god. No wonder Zeus was surprised. Annabeth nodded. Exactly. It's unprecedented. Artemis must have a reason beyond what she stated to the council. Maybe she just wants to keep an eye on the new wild card, Percy suggested. Better to have you where she can watch you than running loose. Or maybe she sees something in you that reminds her of why the hunt exists in the first place, came a new voice. The Y turned to see a girl approaching, perhaps 15 or 16 in appearance, with spiky black hair, electric blue eyes, and a silver circlet on her brow. She wore the same silver and gray camouflage tee had Naruto had seen on the few hunters visiting the camp. Talia, Percy greeted with a smile. I thought you'd be with the rest of the hunters. Lady Artemis sent me to retrieve her new project, Talia replied, her gaze fixing on Naruto with open curiosity. So you're the shinobi god everyone's talking about. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck self-consciously. I guess so, though the god part is still new. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki in your naming order. Talia extended her arm in a warrior's greeting, which Naruto returned, grasping her forearm as she took his. Talia Grace, daughter of Zeus and lieutenant of the hunt. And I'll be your guide to not getting yourself turned into a jackalope by my lady. Jackalope. Naruto questioned. Half jackrabbit, half antelope, Annabeth explained. Artemis's favorite form of punishment for males who annoy her. Naruto winced. Good to know. Any other survival tips? Don't flirt with the hunters, don't challenge Artemis's authority without good reason. And don't suggest that men can do anything better than women, Taliah listed. Pretty simple, really. I think I can manage that, Naruto said with a slight smile. I was raised by a woman who could shatter mountains with her finger. I've got a healthy respect for female strength. Taliah's expression softened slightly. Then you might just survive this arrangement. She checked a silver watch on her wrist. We should go. The hunt is camped a few miles north, and Lady Artemis doesn't like to linger in one place too long. The four walked to Half-Blood Hill, where they would part ways. At the crest, beneath a tall pine tree that Naruto somehow sensed was connected to Taliah, they stopped for goodbyes. Remember what we told you about the gods, Annabeth said. They're not like mortal leaders. They operate on a different timescale, with different priorities. Percy nodded in agreement. And if you need anything, send a message. Iris messaging. Taliah can show you how it works. Or send one of those clone things if they can travel that far. I will, Naruto promised, genuinely touched by their concern. In a short time, these two had become his first allies in this strange new world. Take care of each other. With final handshakes and a promise to meet again when Naruto returned to camp, Percy and Annabeth headed back down the hill. Naruto turned to Taliah, who was waiting with an expression that mixed impatience with curiosity. So, she said, can you really make copies of yourself? The stories spreading through camp are getting pretty wild. In answer, Naruto formed a hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a puff of smoke, 3 identical Narutos appeared beside him, each giving Taliah a friendly wave. The daughter of Zeus blinked, then broke into a genuine smile. Okay. That's pretty cool. Would have been useful during Capture the Flag. The clones disappeared, and Naruto shrugged. They're not just for show. They're solid, they can fight. And anything they learn, I learn when they disperse. Handy for reconnaissance, Taliah noted with approval. She gestured toward the forest beyond the camp boundaries. Come on, Shinobi God. The hunt awaits, and they're not nearly as friendly as I am. They set off at a brisk pace that would have winded a mortal but felt comfortable to Naruto. As they traveled, Taliah explained more about the hunters, their oath, their lifestyle, their history of battling monsters and protecting maidens across the centuries. Most joined to escape something, she explained as they navigated a particularly dense section of forest. Abusive families, unwanted arranged marriages, societies that limited women's choices. The hunt offers freedom and sisterhood, without the complications men typically bring. And you? Naruto asked, curious about this fierce daughter of Zeus. What brought you to the hunt? Taliah was silent for a moment, pushing aside a low-hanging branch. Prophecies. Expectations. The crushing weight of being a child of the Big Three. She glanced at him. And a promise I made to protect someone who can't protect herself. There was a story there, Naruto sensed, but he didn't press. Everyone had parts of their past they kept guarded. He certainly did. Anyway, Taliah continued, changing the subject, what's your world like? Lady Artemis mentioned Somethi-ing about ninja villages and tailed beasts, but not much detail. Naruto spent the next hour describing the shinobi world, the 5 great nations, the hidden villages, the complex politics and conflicts that had shaped his life. He explained the basics of chakra and ninjutsu, the rank system of shinobi, and the 4th great ninja war that had just concluded when he was transported here. So you were some kind of hero in your world? Taliah observed as they crossed a small stream. Savior of the village, child of prophecy, all that. Naruto shrugged uncomfortably. I just did what anyone would do to protect their precious people. And I wasn't alone. My friends fought just as hard. Humble too, Taliah noted with a raised eyebrow. Definitely not like most of the gods of Met. The forest began to thin. And Naruto sensed a change in the air, a concentration of energy ahead that reminded him of the divine presence he'd felt on Olympus, though on a smaller scale. They crested a small rise. And below them stretched a clearing where a dozen silver tents had been arranged in a perfect crescent. Young women in silver clothing moved about the camp with purpose, some cleaning weapons, oath. tending to falcons and wolves that served as the hunt's companions. At the center of the camp, beside a cooking fire that emitted no smoke, stood Artemis in her 12-year-old form, conferring with several hunters who seemed to be reporting from a scouting mission. "Here we are," Talia said. "Home, such as it is. We never stay in one place long, but wherever the hunt is camped is home." As they descended toward the camp, Naruto felt dozens of eyes turned toward him, some curious, most suspicious or outright hostile. The wolves raised their heads, sniffing the air and growling softly at his unfamiliar scent. Artemis dismissed the scouts as Talia and Naruto approached, her silver eyes fixed on Naruto with the same predatory assessment he'd noted during their first meeting. "You're punctual," the goddess observed. "Good. The hunt has no patience for those who waste our time. Thank you for agreeing to take me on, Lady Artemis," Naruto said formally, deciding that a little respect couldn't hurt. "I appreciate the opportunity to learn about this world." Artemis studied him for a moment longer before turning to address the gathered hunters, who had formed a loose semicircle behind her. "Sisters," she announced, "as you've no doubt heard, the fates have seen fit to create a new god from a warrior of another world. Naruto Uzumaki now holds the domain of balance and harmony, a position vacant since Aether's fall. By decree of the council, he will travel with us for one season, learning the ways of our world and his new role." Murmurs spread through the hunters, most sounding displeased with this arrangement. Naruto noticed several hands tightening on bow grips or knife hilts. "I understand your concerns," Artemis continued. "Never in our long history has a male traveled with the hunt. But these are unusual circumstances, and the fates themselves have intervened. I ask you to respect my decision in this matter." She turned back to Naruto. "You will camp at the edge of our circle, maintaining an appropriate distance. You will hunt your own food, tend your own needs, and follow our rules without question. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Naruto agreed. "Though I hope I can be of some help during my time here. I didn't become a shinobi to sit on the sidelines." A hint of approval flickered in Artemis's eyes. "We shall see. The hunt faces many dangers, and how you respond to them will tell us much about your character and abilities." She gestured to one of the older hunters, a girl with auburn hair who might have been 17 or 18. "Phoebe, show our guest where he may establish his camp." The hunter named Phoebe stepped forward, her expression making it clear this task was unwelcome. "This way," she said curtly, not waiting to see if Naruto followed. As they walked toward the edge of the clearing, Naruto sensed he was about to face a challenge more complex than any council of gods. These were warriors who had chosen a life apart from men, now forced to accept a male in their midst. Building trust would be difficult, perhaps impossible. "Nothing new for you, Kit," Kurama commented in his mind. "You've changed the minds of more stubborn beings than these." Naruto smiled inwardly at the fox's confidence. If there was one thing he had experience with, it was turning enemies into allies, skeptics into believers. It had been his path since childhood, from village pariah to respected shinobi, from Kurama's jailer to his partner. Perhaps becoming the god of balance and harmony wasn't so strange after all. In many ways, it was the role he'd been preparing for his entire life. Phoebe stopped at the far edge of the clearing, indicating a flat spot beneath a tall oak tree. "You can set up here. Close enough to be within the hunt's protection. Far enough to maintain propriety." Her tone made it clear that propriety meant as far away from us as possible. "Thank you," Naruto said sincerely. "I know this isn't easy for any of you, having me here. I'll do my best not to disrupt your way of life." Phoebe regarded him with slightly less hostility. "Lady Artemis has her reasons for agreeing to this arrangement. It's not my place to question her wisdom." She hesitated, then added reluctantly, "If you need anything essential, ask Talia. She's our lieutenant and the most tolerant of males." With that limited offer of assistance, she turned and walked back toward the main camp, leaving Naruto to establish his small outpost. He unrolled the sleeping bag Percy had lent him and arranged his few possessions neatly beside it. Then, after a moment's consideration, he created several shadow clones. "Let's set up a proper camp," he told them. "Nothing fancy, but something functional." The clones nodded and set to work. Some gathered wood for a small fire pit, others wove branches into a simple lean-to shelter that would provide better protection than just the sleeping bag. One clone used a basic Earth-style jutsu to create a small barrier around the camp, not a wall, just a subtle ridge that defined his space and would channel rainwater away. From the main camp, several hunters watched with undisguised curiosity as multiple Narutos worked in perfect coordination. The shadow clone technique wasn't something they'd seen before, and despite their reservations about him, the novelty was intriguing. As the sun began to set, Naruto dispelled his clones and sat cross-legged beside his small fire, entering a meditative state. He needed to explore this new power flowing through him, the divine ichor that now mixed with his chakra. It felt similar to natural energy, but more focused, as if it resonated with specific concepts rather than the world as a whole. "It's changing us," Kurama observed. "Slowly, but definitely. I can feel it interacting with my chakra too." "Is it dangerous?" Naruto asked silently. "Not dangerous," the fox replied. "Just different. More connected to concepts. I think this is what gives the gods their domains. This energy naturally aligns with certain aspects of reality." Naruto focused inward, sensing how the divine energy in his system gravitated toward certain thoughts and emotions, particularly those related to balance, harmony, and reconciliation. When he thought about bringing opposing forces into equilibrium, the energy hummed more strongly. "So this is what being the god of balance feels like," he murmured to himself. "Interesting." A rustle of leaves drew him from his meditation. Talia approached his camp, carrying a silver plate with what appeared to be roasted venison and wild vegetables. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, setting the plate down at the edge of his camp. "And Lady Artemis wants you to join us for a council. We've received reports of unusual monster activity to the north, something that might interest the god of balance." Naruto accepted the food with thanks. "What kind of unusual activity?" Talia's expression grew serious. "Monsters that should be enemies working together. A coalition of telekines, empusai, and hellhounds moving with purpose rather than hunting randomly. It's not natural. Sounds like my domain is already being challenged," Naruto observed. "I'll be right there." As Talia walked away, Naruto quickly ate the offered meal. The food was simple but perfectly prepared, with a subtle flavor that reminded him of the wild foods Jiraiya had taught him to forage during their training journey. The thought of his old master brought a pang of sadness. Jiraiya would have loved this adventure. New world, beautiful immortal women. Strange powers to analyze. He would have gotten himself turned into a jackalope within the first hour, but he would have enjoyed every minute of it. With a small smile at the memory, Naruto stood and made his way toward the center of the hunt's camp, where Artemis and her lieutenants were gathering around the main fire. The hunters parted reluctantly to allow him into their circle, many still regarding him with suspicion. Artemis nodded in acknowledgement of his arrival. "Naruto. Good. This situation concerns your domain directly." She gestured to a map spread on a silver cloth before her. Various points had been marked with symbols Naruto didn't recognize. "For the past 3 weeks, we've tracked unusual monster movements across New England," the goddess explained. "Normally, different species of monsters avoid each other, competing for demigod prey rather than cooperating. But these groups are moving in coordinated patterns, converging on this location." She pointed to a spot in what Percy had taught him was called Vermont. "What's there?" Naruto asked. "An ancient site of power," Artemis replied. "A place where the boundaries between dimensions grow thin at certain times of the year. The autumn equinox approaches, 3 days from now, when the balance between light and darkness is perfect." Naruto understood immediately. "And I appeared right before this. That's not coincidence. The fates rarely deal in coincidence," Artemis agreed. "We believe whatever force is coordinating these monsters intends to use the equinox energies for some ritual. Given your arrival in new domain, it seems likely the ritual involves dimensional barriers." Talia leaned forward. "Could be someone trying to bring more things from your world through. Or send you back." The possibility sent a jolt through Naruto. A way home. But at what cost? Any ritual requiring coordinated monster armies couldn't have benign purposes. "This is precisely why Zeus assigned you to us," Artemis continued. "Your domain, your origin, and this disturbance are clearly connected. We will investigate, determine the threat, and eliminate it. You will accompany us and learn how divine intervention works in this world. It wasn't a request. Despite her diminutive appearance, Artemis commanded with the absolute authority of someone who had led hunters for thousands of years. Naruto found himself respecting her directness. She didn't play the political games he'd sensed from Zeus and many of the other Olympians. "When do we leave?" he asked. "Dawn," Artemis replied. "The hunt moves fast and travels light. Be ready." The council concluded shortly after, with hunters assigned to various preparation tasks. As they dispersed, one of the younger hunters, he couldn't have been more than 12 in appearance, approached Naruto cautiously. "Is it true you can make copies of yourself?" she asked, curiosity overcoming her wariness of males. Naruto smiled and formed the hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A single clone appeared beside him, waving cheerfully to the young hunter. Her eyes widened with delight. "That's amazing," she exclaimed. "Could you teach?" Sophia, an older hunter, called sharply. "Come help with the arrows." "Leave the man alone." The girl, Sophia, looked disappointed but obeyed, scurrying off with a last glance at Naruto and his clone. The clone dispelled itself with a small puff of smoke. "You're good with children," Artemis observed, appearing silently beside him. Naruto jumped slightly. He hadn't sensed her approach, a testament to her hunting skills. "I like kids. They haven't learned to hate or fear what's different yet." Artemis studied him with those ancient silver eyes. "Many of my hunters were children when they joined. Some fleeing abuse, others abandonment, all seeking a family they couldn't find elsewhere." "Like Sophia," Naruto guessed. The goddess nodded. "Found in the ruins of her home after monsters attacked. Both parents slain. A half-blood with nowhere to go." "You saved her," Naruto said. "Gave her a home, a purpose." "I offer a choice," Artemis corrected. "Freedom from the fate society often forces upon women. Nothing more, nothing less." Naruto considered this. "In my world, Kunoichi, female ninja, faced similar challenges. Expected to be both perfect warriors and perfect women by contradictory standards. The best ones defined their own path instead." Something like approval flickered in Artemis's expression. "Perhaps your world is not so different from ours after all." She turned to leave, then paused. "Rest well, Naruto Uzumaki. Tomorrow we hunt, and you will be judged not by your words but by your actions." As she walked away, Naruto felt he'd passed some small test. Not acceptance. That would take much more, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. He returned to his camp and settled into his sleeping bag, gazing up at unfamiliar stars. Tomorrow would bring his first real mission as a god of this world. A chance to prove himself, to learn more about his new powers, and possibly to discover a connection to his home. "Sleep, Kit," Kurama advised. "I'll keep watch." Grateful for the fox's vigilance, Naruto closed his eyes. His last thought before drifting off was of Konoha, not with the sharp pain of earlier, but with a determined resolve. Somehow, he would find a way to connect the worlds. Balance and harmony weren't just about this new reality, they were about bridging the gap to the one he'd left behind. With that promise to himself, the new god of balance and harmony surrendered to sleep, while around him, the hunt prepared for tomorrow's journey and whatever dangers it might bring. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Divinity's Edge. The hunt moved silver shadows through the pre-dawn forest, each hunter perfectly synchronized with the others. Naruto kept pace easily, impressed by their efficiency. No wasted movement, no unnecessary communication. Just the fluid motion of predators who had hunted together for centuries. Artemis led from the front, occasionally shifting forms between her 12-year-old appearance and a slightly older Tina version that seemed better suited for rapid travel. Talia flanked her left side, while Phoebe took the right. The rest of the hunters, 14 in total, maintained a loose formation that could quickly tighten for defense or spread for ambushes. They covered ground at a pace that would have exhausted even trained shinobi, yet showed no signs of fatigue. Divine stamina, Naruto supposed, or perhaps a blessing from Artemis herself. He found his own endurance enhanced by whatever transformation the fates had worked on him. He wasn't even breathing hard after hours of continuous running. "Your body is changing," Kurama observed. "The divine ichor is reinforcing your already impressive stamina." I suspect you could run for days now without rest. Useful, Naruto replied silently. But weird. I'm becoming something different, Kurama. Not quite human anymore, but not quite like the other gods either. You were never quite human to begin with, Kit, the fox reminded him. Jinchuriki exist, at the boundary between human and Biju. This is just another evolution. Naruto considered this as they traveled northward through increasingly rugged terrain. The fox had a point. His entire life had been about existing between categories, village pariah and hero, human and vessel, friend and weapon. Perhaps becoming a cross-dimensional god was just the next step in a journey that had never been ordinary. Around noon, Artemis called a brief halt beside a crystal-clear stream. The hunters refilled water skins and consumed small amounts of jerky and dried fruit, just enough to maintain energy without slowing them down. Taliah approached where Naruto stood slightly apart from the group, respecting their space. We're making good time, she said, offering him a silver canteen. Should reach the target area by nightfall. Naruto accepted the water gratefully. Thanks. I've been meaning to ask. What exactly is this ancient site of power we're heading toward? Taliah glanced toward Artemis, who nodded permission to explain. It's called the Convergence, Taliah said, lowering her voice. A natural formation where 5 ley lines, currents of magical energy, intersect beneath a circle of standing stones. Native American shamans used it first, then Norse explorers, then colonial witches. It's not dedicated to any specific pantheon, which makes it both powerful and dangerous. Neutral ground between divine territories, Naruto mused. Sounds like exactly the kind of place that would fall under my domain. Taliah nodded. That's what Lady Artemis thinks too. Which is why whoever is gathering monsters there probably isn't doing it to welcome you to the neighborhood. Before Naruto could respond, a series of sharp whistles cut through the air, a warning from the scouts positioned at the perimeter. Artemis was immediately alert, bow materializing in her hands. Formation, she commanded softly, and the hunters moved with practiced precision into a defensive circle. Naruto stepped forward. Let me check it out. My clones can scout without risking anyone. Artemis considered him for a moment, then nodded. Do it. Naruto formed his hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 5 clones appeared, each receiving silent instructions before darting off in different directions. The hunters watched with a mixture of wariness and fascination. Useful trick, Phoebe admitted grudgingly. Better than sending real people into potential danger. They're not just illusions, Naruto explained. They're solid clones with all my abilities. And when they dispel, I get their memories and experiences. So you can be in 5 places at once, Taliah observed. No wonder the fates thought you'd make a decent god of balance. A few minutes later, Naruto stiffened as the first clone dispelled. Its memories flooding back to him. Contact, he reported. Northeast quadrant, about half a kilometer. A mixed group. Those fish dog things you called telekines, some women with mismatched legs, and empusai. Artemis supplied for the mismatched leg creatures. And something else. A man in dark robes directing them. Not a monster, at least, not like the others. He's drawing symbols on the ground in some kind of shimmering ink. Artemis's eyes narrowed. A mortal sorcerer. Rare, but dangerous. They trade their humanity for power, becoming neither mortal nor monster, but something in between. Another clone dispelled. They're setting up a perimeter, Naruto continued. Systematic patrols, overlapping fields of vision. Whoever this sorcerer is, he's trained his monsters well. How many? Taliah asked. At least 20 telekines, a dozen empusai, and... He paused as the third clone's memories arrived. Something big moving in the trees. My clone could get a clear look before it had to pull back. We need to observe longer before engaging, Artemis decided. If this is connected to the convergence, they may lead us to others involved in the plot. Naruto nodded. 2 of my clones are still active, staying hidden and watching. They can maintain position indefinitely. The hunters reformed into a more compact traveling formation, moving with greater stealth now that they knew enemies were near. Artemis signaled for them to circle around to approach from the west, using the terrain for cover. As they moved, Naruto received periodic updates from his remaining clones. The sorcerer had completed whatever ritual he was preparing, creating a circle of glowing symbols that pulsed with sickly green light. More monsters had arrived, including the big something that turned out to be a massive scorpion-like creature with glowing red eyes. Pit scorpion, Talia identified when Naruto described it. Nasty. Their stingers can kill in 60 seconds. And they're intelligent enough to target vital spots. By late afternoon, they had positioned themselves on a wooded ridge overlooking a small valley. Below, partially concealed among ancient oak trees, stood a circle of weather-worn standing stones, the Convergence. The sorcerer had established his ritual site just outside the stone circle, with monsters patrolling in concentric rings around it. Artemis studied the scene through narrowed eyes. They're waiting for something. The equinox is still 3 days away. Maybe reinforcements, Phoebe suggested. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing on the strange new senses that came with his godhood. The divine energy within him responded to the sight below, resonating with the power concentrated there. But something felt wrong, discordant, like musical notes slightly out of tune. The balance is already disrupted, he said, opening his eyes. Whatever they're planning, they've already started the process. Artemis looked at him sharply. You can sense this. Naruto nodded. It's like hearing a familiar song being played incorrectly. The energy should flow evenly through those stones, but it's being pulled toward that ritual circle instead. The goddess considered this information. Then we cannot simply observe. We must intervene before the disruption grows worse. She turned to her hunters. Standard ambush pattern. Disable the outer sentries silently. Then concentrate fire on the larger threats while Talia's team disrupts the ritual circle. What about me? Naruto asked. Artemis regarded him with those ancient silver eyes. The sorcerer is yours. As god of balance, it falls to you to deal with those who deliberately disrupt it. Consider this your first divine intervention. Naruto nodded, understanding the test this represented. Not just of his combat abilities, but of his judgment in exercising his new divine authority. I'll try not to disappoint, he said simply. Artemis almost smiled, a barely perceptible softening around her eyes. See that you don't. Hunters, move out. The silver-clad warriors melted into the forest with practiced ease, breaking into pre-arranged teams. Talia gave Naruto a quick nod before following Artemis down the slope. Naruto created 3 shadow clones, sending them to supplement the hunters' efforts while keeping his own focus on the central target, the sorcerer himself. As he moved through the trees, he reached for the chakra pathways within himself, assessing his options. Normal Rasengan might not be enough against magic, Kurama advised. Better to go with Sage mode to start. It will help you sense any hidden traps or barriers. Good call, Naruto agreed, finding a concealed position from which to prepare. He stilled his breathing and reached for the natural energy around him, and gasped as it flooded in far more readily than he was accustomed to. The divine ichor in his system seemed to act as a conductor, drawing natural energy without the usual lengthy meditation process. Careful, Kurama warned. Don't overload yourself. This world's natural energy feels different, wilder somehow. Naruto quickly balanced the influx, stabilizing the Sage mode transformation. Orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes, which shifted to a golden amber color with rectangular pupils. His awareness expanded dramatically, encompassing the entire valley in a 3-dimensional mental map of energy signatures. He could sense each hunter moving into position, feel the twisted chakra-like energy of the monsters, and most prominently, the swirling dark power emanating from the sorcerer at the center of the ritual circle. There was something familiar about that energy, a resonance that reminded him of the dimensional rift that had brought him to this world. The first attack came with silent efficiency. On the outer perimeter, 3 telekines fell simultaneously, silver arrows protruding from vital points. Before their companions could sound an alarm, more arrows found their marks. The hunters were living up to their name, striking with deadly precision. Talia's team circled behind the stone formation, approaching the ritual site from the opposite direction. Naruto sensed them placing small objects at intervals, Greek fire charges, Percy had called them, explaining their explosive properties. The sorcerer remained focused on his ritual, chanting in a language that sounded ancient even to Naruto's untrained ear. The symbols around him pulsed more intensely with each phrase, the sickly green light growing brighter. Then everything happened at once. The pit scorpion, more perceptive than the other monsters, detected the hunter's presence and let out a chittering shriek of warning. The remaining monsters turned to face the threat, only to be met with a synchronized volley of silver arrows that cut down the front ranks. Simultaneously, Talia's team detonated their Greek fire charges, creating a distraction on the opposite side. As monsters turned to face this new threat, Artemis herself leapt into their midst, her hunting knives flashing like quicksilver as she moved with inhuman speed and grace. Naruto seized the opportunity, launching himself from his hiding place directly toward the sorcerer. The man looked up, his chant faltering as he sensed the incoming threat. Too late. Sage Art. Rasengan. Naruto drove the spiraling sphere of chakra, enhanced with natural energy, toward the sorcerer's chest. But instead of connecting, the Rasengan hit an invisible barrier, the energy dissipating in a shower of green and blue sparks. The sorcerer smiled thinly, revealing teeth filed to points like a shark's. "The new god arrives right on schedule," he said, his voice carrying an accent Naruto couldn't place. How predictable the fates have become. Naruto landed in a defensive stance, reassessing his opponent. "You were expecting me, of course." The sorcerer made a dismissive gesture. "Why do you think? We began our preparations the moment you arrived in this world. Your presence is the catalyst we required." Around them, battle raged as hunters engaged the monster forces. Artemis was a blur of silver, each movement resulting in another monster dissolving into golden dust. Talia fought with a spear crackling with electricity, while her team methodically destroyed sections of the ritual circle. The sorcerer noticed this and frowned. Annoying distractions. He raised a hand, and the ground beneath the hunters erupted, skeletal hands clawing up to grab at their ankles. "Focus on me," Naruto growled, forming the cross seal again. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The clearing filled with dozens of Naruto clones, each launching themselves at the sorcerer from different angles. The barrier flickered under the sustained assault, its green light wavering. "Impressive," the sorcerer acknowledged, drawing a symbol in the air that sent a wave of force outward, dispelling several clones. "But futile. Do you even understand what you are, god of balance? What power you now channel?" "I know enough," Naruto replied, gathering chakra for his next attack. "I know you're disrupting the natural flow of energy in this place. And that you're expecting something to happen at the equinox." The sorcerer laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "The equinox is merely optimal timing. The process began the moment you entered this dimension, tearing a hole that can be exploited." A chill ran down Naruto's spine. This wasn't just about him or even about godhood, this was about the breach between dimensions that had brought him here. "Who are you working for?" he demanded, signaling his remaining clones to circle the sorcerer, looking for weaknesses in the barrier. "A power older than the Olympians," the sorcerer replied. "One who understands that dimensions are meant to be bridges, not barriers." Naruto felt a surge of anger, and with it, a strange new sensation as the divine energy within him responded to his emotions. The golden flecks in his eyes brightened, and he felt a connection to the stone circle itself, as if the ancient monument recognized him as an authority over its purpose. "Those stones," he said slowly. "They're meant to maintain balance between worlds, aren't they? Not tear them open." The sorcerer's expression faltered slightly. "You begin to understand. But too late." He made a sharp slashing motion, and the ritual circle flared brilliantly. The ground began to tremble, and the air between the standing stones shimmered like a heat mirage. "Naruto!" Talia shouted from across the clearing, fighting her way toward him. "The stones are activating. Lady Artemis says to shut it down now." The sorcerer began chanting again, faster and more urgently. Whatever was coming, it was happening now rather than at the equinox. They had forced his hand by attacking. "Kit," Kurama's voice was urgent in Naruto's mind. "Use our combined chakra with this new divine energy. If this is about dimensional barriers, your connection to both worlds might give you authority here." Naruto nodded, dropping deeper into his mindscape where Kurama waited. The massive fox Rieger, dead him with ancient eyes that had seen countless battles. "Ready?" the Biju asked. "Let's do this, partner." In the physical world, Naruto's appearance began to change. The orange sage mode markings remained, But now golden chakra enveloped his body, forming the familiar cloak with 9 tails of energy swirling behind him. This time, however, the chakra was infused with threads of divine ichor, giving it a luminous quality like sunlight through honey. The sorcerer's eyes widened at the transformation. What is this? You shouldn't be able to. Naruto didn't let him finish. With speed that even Artemis might have envied, he crossed the distance between them, the barrier around the sorcerer shattering like glass against his enhanced chakra cloak. This world chose me as its god of balance, Naruto said, his voice carrying a dual resonance of his own and Kurama's deeper tones. Which means I decide what crosses between dimensions and what doesn't. He seized the sorcerer by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. The man's dark robe smoldered where they contacted Naruto's chakra cloak. Who sent you? Naruto demanded. What were you trying to bring through? The sorcerer struggled in his grip, dark energy crackling around him in desperate defense. The Crooked One sees all. The Titan King will rise again, with allies from across the void. Chronos. The name reson aided in Naruto's mind from Percy's explanations of the recent Titan War. The defeated king of the Titans was trying to reconstitute himself by drawing power or allies from other dimensions, potentially even from Naruto's world. Not happening, Naruto growled. Not on my watch. With his free hand, he formed a Rasengan, but this one was different, infused with both divine energy and Kurama's chakra. It glowed with golden blue light. Small satellite orbs of energy orbiting the central sphere. Divine Sage Art. Harmonic Rasengan. The new technique struck the sorcerer at point-blank range, overwhelming his remaining defenses. Instead of the usual destructive spiral, however, this Rasengan seemed to realign the man's energy, forcibly bringing his chaotic power into balanced patterns. The sorcerer screamed, not in pain, but in existential terror as his carefully cultivated dark power was neutralized. The ritual circle beneath them flickered and died, the sickly green symbols fading like mist under strong sunlight. As the Rasengan's energy dissipated, Naruto lowered the now unconscious sorcerer to the ground. The man looked different, younger, the shark-like teeth gone, his features more human. Whatever dark transformation he had undergone was at least partially reversed. Around them, the battle was concluding as the monsters, deprived of their leader's power, fell to the hunters' coordinated attacks. The standing stones of the convergence still hummed with energy, but it was returning to its natural rhythm, no longer being siphoned for the ritual. Artemis approached, her elver eyes taking in Naruto's transformed state with open curiosity. What did you do to him? She asked, gesturing to the unconscious sorcerer. I balanced him, Naruto replied, his voice still carrying that dual resonance. His energy was corrupted, twisted out of its natural pattern. My Rasengan forced it back into harmony. You didn't kill him, the goddess observed, neither approving nor condemning, simply noting the fact. Killing is easy, Naruto said, allowing his transformation to fade, returning to his normal appearance. Healing is harder, and sometimes more effective. Artemis studied him thoughtfully, an unusual approach for a god. Most of us would have simply obliterated the threat. I'm not most gods, Naruto replied with a small smile. Never was, never will be. So, nothing-like respect flickered in the goddess's expression. No, I suppose you're not. She turned to survey the battlefield. Hunters, secure the perimeter and check for survivors. Talia, assess the convergence stones for damage. As the hunters moved to obey, Artemis returned her attention to Naruto. The sorcerer mentioned Chronos, the Titan Lord my brother Percy helped defeat. Yeah, I caught that, Naruto confirmed. Something about bringing allies across the void. I think my arrival created a weakness in the barrier between dimensions. They were trying to exploit it. For the Titan Lord to be stirring again so soon after his defeat. Artemis frowned. This is troubling news that must be brought to the council. Naruto glanced at the unconscious sorcerer. What happens to him? He will be taken to Olympus for questioning, Artemis replied. Those who serve Titans forfeit any mortal protections. Naruto nodded, understanding the necessity even if he didn't entirely agree with the implied fate awaiting the man. In the shinobi world, interrogation was standard procedure for captured enemies, though methods varied widely between villages. Talia jogged over from the stone circle, her spear still crackling with residual electricity. The convergence is stabilizing, she reported. Whatever they were doing, it's been disrupted. But, she hesitated. But, Artemis prompted. There's still a residual connection. Very faint, but definitely there. Like an echo between worlds. Talia glanced at Naruto. It feels similar to the energy signature we detected when you first appeared at camp. Naruto's pulse quickened. A connection to my world. Could it be used to communicate, maybe even to travel back? Possibly, Artemis said cautiously. But such passages are dangerous and unpredictable. More likely, it would bring something else through, perhaps not what you hoped for. The reminder sobered Naruto. If Kronos' followers could use the dimensional weakness to bring allies to this world. The reverse was also true. Enemies from here could potentially cross into the shinobi world. The thought of creatures like the Empusai or Telekines rampaging through Konoha was deeply unsettling. Then we need to seal it properly, he decided. Not just disrupt the ritual, but actively repair whatever damage was done to the barrier. Artemis raised an eyebrow. You believe you can do this? I don't know, Naruto admitted. But if anyone in this world has the authority to try, it's probably the guy who got appointed God of Balance after falling through a dimensional crack. A rare smile touched Artemis's lips. A fair assessment. Very well, God of Balance. Show us what you can do. With the hunters forming a protective perimeter, Naruto approached the center of the stone circle. The ancient monoliths towered above him, weathered surfaces covered in faint carvings that seemed to shift between different cultural styles, Norse runes one moment, indigenous American symbols the next. Then Greek letters, never settling into a single form. They respond to whoever observes them, Talia explained, seeing his fascination. The convergence adapts to those who use it. That's what makes it neutral territory among pantheons. Naruto nodded, feeling the resonance between his new divine nature and the stone's purpose. They were, in their own way, instruments of balance, allowing different divine traditions to access the same power without conflict. He sat cross-legged in the exact center of the circle, closing his eyes and entering a meditative state. The divine energy within him responded more readily now, after his battle with the sorcerer. It was becoming more integrated with his chakra, less foreign. What's your plan, Kit? Kurama inquired. Something like the seal we used on the 10 tails, Naruto replied internally. But adapted to work on a dimensional rift rather than a physical entity. You realize we're making this up as we go, right? The fox pointed out dryly. Neither of us has sealed dimensional passages before. First time for everything, Naruto replied with his characteristic optimism. Besides, that's how I created most of my techniques. Trial and error, guided by intuition. The fox sighed but lent his chakra willingly. Just don't accidentally seal us into a pocket dimension. I've spent enough time imprisoned in various containers to last several lifetimes. Naruto smiled at Kurama's grumbling, then focused on the task at hand. He reached out with his senses, probing the space within the stone circle. There, a subtle discontinuity in the fabric of reality, like a partially healed wound that could reopen under stress. The sorcerer's ritual had been picking at the scab, trying to widen the tear. Drawing on his knowledge of sealing techniques and guided by his new divine instincts, Naruto began to shape his combined chakra and ichor into a complex matrix. Unlike traditional fuinjutsu that required physical symbols, this seal existed on an energetic level, invisible to normal sight but palpable to those with divine or spiritual awareness. The standing stones began to resonate, amplifying his efforts. Naruto felt a surge of gratitude toward them, as if they were ancient allies welcoming his assistance after enduring the sorcerer's abuse. Layer by layer, he constructed the seal, a pattern that would reinforce the natural boundary between dimensions while still allowing the harmonic resonance that kept worlds in proper relationship. Not a wall, but a properly functioning membrane. Careful, Kurama cautioned as Naruto approached the final stage. I'm sensing something on the other side of the rift. A familiar chakra. Naruto almost lost his concentration. From our world. Who? Can't tell precisely. But it feels like Kakashi. Yes, definitely Hataki's lightning nature, but there's something else mixed with it. Hope surged through Naruto. Were his friends searching for him? Had they found a way to track him across dimensions? For a moment, he was tempted to widen the rift instead of sealing it, to call out to whoever was probing from the other side. But wisdom prevailed. An unstable connection would help no one and might cause more harm than good. We'll find another way, he decided. One that doesn't risk both worlds. With that resolution, he completed the seal. Divine energy flowed through the pattern, setting it in place with a finality that resonated through the entire stone circle. The monoliths glowed briefly with golden light, then settled back into their weathered appearance. Though somehow they seemed more solid, more present than before. Naruto opened his eyes, feeling drained but satisfied. The discontinuity was gone, replaced by a proper functioning boundary that would allow the natural echo between worlds without permitting unauthorized passage. As he stood, somewhat shakily, he found Artemis watching him with an unreadable expression. "It is done?" she asked. Naruto nodded. "The immediate threat is sealed. There might be other weak points elsewhere, but this one is secure." The goddess approached, studying the stones with her ancient silver eyes. "You did not close the connection entirely," she observed. "There remains a harmonic resonance. Complete isolation isn't balance," Naruto explained. "Worlds should be connected, just not bleeding into each other chaotically. Like different ecosystems sharing a coastline, the boundary is important, but so is the exchange." Artemis considered this philosophy an interesting perspective for a god so new to his domain. Most would have simply severed the connection completely, taking the simplest approach. "Simple isn't always right," Naruto replied. "And I have a vested interest in maintaining some connection to my home world." "Indeed." The goddess turned to face him directly. "You sensed something during the sealing. Someone from your world." It wasn't a question. Naruto wondered if his expression had given him away, or if Artemis's divine perception was simply that acute. "A familiar chakra signature," he confirmed. "One of my mentors, possibly with others. They might be searching for me. And yet you did not attempt contact." "Too risky," Naruto said. "An unstable connection could have brought Kronos' allies through instead, or pulled innocent people into this world against their will. Better to secure things properly first, then find a controlled method of communication." Artemis nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. "Wisdom worthy of your domain. Come, we have a prisoner to transport and a report to prepare for the council." As they rejoined the hunters, Naruto noticed a shift in how they regarded him. The open suspicion had given way to cautious respect, at least among some. His actions in battle and his careful sealing of the rift had demonstrated both power and restraint, qualities that even the man-avoiding hunters could appreciate. Talia approached, offering a water skin. "Not bad for your first divine intervention," she said with a hint of a smile. "You didn't even need to turn anyone into a small woodland creature." Naruto accepted the water gratefully. "Is that the standard metric for successful godhood? Minimal mammal transformations? In this pantheon, pretty much." She nodded toward where several hunters were securing the still unconscious sorcerer. "What you did to him was interesting. I've never seen a god realign someone's energy rather than just blast them." "It seemed appropriate for a god of balance," Naruto replied. "Destruction is sometimes necessary, but restoration is usually better in the long run." Talia studied him thoughtfully. "You really are different from most gods I've met. Less imperious." "I've only been a god for a couple of days," Naruto pointed out. "Give me time. Maybe I'll develop a god complex eventually." "I doubt it," she said with surprising certainty. "Something tells me you'll always be Naruto first, god of balance second." Before he could respond to this unexpected vote of confidence, Artemis summoned them to rejoin the main group. The hunt was preparing to move out, this time with their prisoner and a sense of urgency that hadn't been present before. "We make for Olympus directly," Artemis announced. "This attempt to breach dimensional barriers on behalf of Kronos must be reported to the council immediately." She raised her hand, and a larger version of her silver chariot materialized, drawn by 4 massive stags whose antlers shimmered with moonlight. Unlike the smaller version that had transported them to Olympus previously, this one had room for several passengers. "Talia, Phoebe, you will accompany us," the goddess instructed. "The rest of the hunt will follow our standard protocols and rendezvous at the winter camp." The hunters saluted, fists over hearts, then began moving out in small groups, disappearing into the forest with practiced stealth. Within minutes, only Artemis, Talia, Phoebe, Naruto, and the bound sorcerer remained. This isn't the triumphant return to Olympus I was expecting after a season with the hunt. Naruto commented as they boarded the chariot, the sorcerer secured in the center. The gods rarely get the luxury of completing tests or training periods uninterrupted, Artemis replied dryly. Crisis tends to accelerate schedules. The chariot rose smoothly into the air, quickly gaining altitude until the convergence site was just a small clearing in the vast expanse of forest below. Naruto found himself oddly comfortable with the sensation of flying, perhaps another aspect of his divine transformation, or simply his shinobi experience with moving through three-dimensional space. As they soared southward toward New York, Naruto reflected on everything that had happened since his arrival in this world. In just a few days, he had become a god, joined an immortal hunt, addled a dimensional plot by a defeated Titan Lord, and created an entirely new divine technique. You never do anything by halves, do you, Kit? Kurama observed with amusement. Would be boring that way, Naruto replied silently, a smile tugging at his lips. The fox chuckled in his mind. True enough, though I wonder what awaits us at this divine council. Your unorthodox approach to godhood seems to be gathering both admirers and critics. Naruto gazed at the horizon, where the distant silhouette of Manhattan was just becoming visible. Story of my life, Kurama. Story of my life. The Olympian Council was already assembled when they arrived, the 12 massive thrones occupied by gods in varying states of attentiveness. Zeus sat at the head of the U formation, his expression thunned. Ruse in the most literal sense, small lightning bolts occasionally crackling in his beard as he frowned. Artemis guided their party to the center of the hall, her prisoner floating before them in silver bonds that seemed to be composed of moonlight. The sorcerer had regained consciousness during the journey but remained silent, his expression a mixture of fear and resignation. Father, Artemis addressed Zeus with a respectful nod. We bring grave news and evidence of plot against Olympus. Zeus leaned forward slightly. Speak then, daughter. Why have you returned before the appointed time, and with your charge? His gaze flicked briefly to Naruto. Artemis recounted their discovery of the ritual at the convergence, the coordinated monster activity, and the sorcerer's confession regarding Kronos' involvement. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the hall grew increasingly tense, gods shifting in their thrones or exchanging concerned glances. The new god intervened directly, Artemis concluded, gesturing to Naruto. Using methods unique to his origin, he disrupted the ritual and sealed the dimensional weakness being exploited. The prisoner was captured rather than destroyed, for questioning. All eyes turned to Naruto, who met their gazes steadily. He was no stranger to scrutiny, having faced everything from village-wide hatred as a child to international attention as the hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War. Explain what you did, Zeus commanded, his voice like distant thunder. In detail, Naruto stepped forward. The sorcerer was using the natural thinness between dimensions at the convergence site to widen the tear my arrival created. From what I gathered, Kronos, or what remains of him, planned to bring allies from other dimensions to help him reconstitute himself. Impossible, declared Athena. Kronos was scattered so thoroughly by Luke's sacrifice that even his consciousness should be unable to reform for centuries. With all respect, Lady Athena, Naruto replied. Dimensional energy could change that equation. If he found allies with abilities different from those in this world, abilities your defenses aren't designed to counter, he might accelerate his return significantly. The wisdom goddess frowned, but more in thought than disagreement. Continue. How did you seal this breach? Naruto described the sealing technique he had developed, combining his knowledge of Fuinjutsu with his new divine energy and authority as god of balance. He explained the philosophy behind maintaining a harmonic resonance while preventing unauthorized passage, a balanced approach rather than complete isolation. When he mentioned sensing a familiar chakra signature from his world, several gods straightened in their thrones. You claim your companions are searching for you? Zeus asked sharply. It's possible, Naruto acknowledged. Kakashi-sensei, one of my mentors, has techniques that can track chakra across great distances. If they found traces of my dimensional passage, they might be probing for me. This presents both opportunity and danger, Athena observed. Allies from your world could be valuable, but opening passages between dimensions risks exactly what our enemies attempted. I have no intention of tearing open portals carelessly, Naruto assured them. But knowing a connection is possible gives us options for controlled communication, at least. Zeus stroked his beard thoughtfully, the lightning diminishing slightly. What of the prisoner? You did not destroy him, though he served our greatest enemy. I balanced him, Naruto explained. His energy was corrupted, twisted by whatever dark power Kronos granted him. My technique, a divine sage art, harmonic Rasengan, forced his energy back into its natural pattern. He's still the same person. But the corruption has been neutralized. Ares leaned forward, his fiery eyes fixed on Naruto with newfound interest. You can create divine combat techniques that quickly. Impressive, for a newborn god. Adaptation has always been my strength, Naruto replied simply. And I had help. He touched his stomach briefly, where the seal containing Kurama resided. Apollo, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. I'm getting some serious prophecy vibes here. Like, major crossroads of destiny stuff. His eyes glowed slightly as he focused on Naruto. You're going to shake things up, aren't you? Whispered Wonder. Apollo, Artemis chided her twin. Your nickname obsession is inappropriate for council matters. The sun god grinned unrepentantly. Just warming up to our newest divine colleague. Not every day we get a god who develops new divine techniques on his first mission. Zeus cleared his throat, commanding attention. While Apollo's methods are questionable, his instincts may have merit. Naruto Uzumaki has demonstrated both power and judgment befitting his domain. He turned his storm-gray eyes to Naruto. The original plan was for you to spend a full season with Artemis's hunt before we reconvened to determine your place in our pantheon. Events have accelerated the timeline. The threat of Kronos attempting to exploit dimensional weaknesses cannot be ignored, Athena agreed. We must adapt our approach. Indeed. Zeus looked around the council. What say you all? Has Naruto Uzumaki, god of balance and harmony, proven himself worthy of recognition as a peer? The gods exchanged glances, some nodding immediately, others more hesitant. Poseidon spoke first. He showed wisdom in sealing the rift without completely severing it, the sea god observed. Balance rather than extremes, appropriate for his domain, and beneficial for our interests. His combat prowess is undeniable, Ares added, surprising many with his support. And creating new divine techniques demonstrates innovation we could use. He chose mercy over destruction, Hestia noted quietly from her modest hearth. A rare choice among gods, but often the wiser path. One by one, the Olympians voiced their assessments, mostly positive, with a few reservations about his unorthodox methods and foreign origin. Finally, Zeus turned to Artemis. You have observed him most closely, daughter. What is your judgment? Artemis considered her answer carefully. Naruto Uzumaki approaches godhood differently than most of us did. He sees it as responsibility rather than privilege, service rather than power. Her silver eyes met Naruto's. This perspective could be either his greatest strength or his greatest vulnerability. But I believe it makes him well suited to the domain of balance and harmony, which requires both compassion and strength in equal measure. She paused, then added with uncharacteristic candidness, I would count him as an ally of the hunt, despite his gender. He has earned that much. Coming from the man-avoiding goddess, this was high praise indeed. Naruto felt a surge of gratitude for her fair assessment. Zeus nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then by consensus of this council, we recognize Naruto Uzumaki as the god of balance and harmony, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. His gaze fixed on Naruto. You will need a permanent residence. Gods traditionally maintain both an Olympian chamber and an earthly domain. I haven't had much time to think about real estate, Naruto admitted. Where do gods usually live when they're not godding? Several of the Olympians actually chuckled at his phrasing, the tension in the hall easing slightly. Your domain gives you certain options, Athena explained. Gods typically reside in locations that resonate with their spheres of influence. As balance and harmony encompasses both natural and social equilibrium, you might consider places where different elements or cultures meet in harmony. Borders, Naruto realized, coastlines, mountain passes, cultural crossroads. Athena nodded approvingly. Precisely. Though given your connection to both this world and your origin world, you might also consider sites of dimensional significance. Like the convergence, Naruto mused. Are other places where the barriers are naturally thin? There is a mountain in Oregon. Artemis offered unexpectedly. Mount Hood. It sits at the junction of several tectonic plates and has been sacred to different human cultures throughout history. More importantly, it contains a hidden valley where dimensional energies naturally pool and balance. My hunt passes through occasionally. It would be a fitting seat for your earthly power. And for your Olympian residence, Zeus added. There is the chamber formerly belonging to Ether. It would require redecoration to suit your personality, but the location is appropriate, balanced between the eastern and western wings of the divine palace. Naruto bowed his head slightly. Thank you. I accept both with gratitude. There remains the question of your official status, Athena noted. While we recognize you as a full god, your inclusion in the Olympian Council itself would require more traditional procedures. I'm not looking to take anyone's throne, Naruto assured them quickly. Having a place to live and official recognition is more than enough for now. I'm still figuring out what being a god even means. Zeus nodded, seemingly relieved to avoid the complex politics of council expansion. Wise. You will be granted observer status at council meetings relevant to your domain, with full voting rights on matters of dimensional stability and balance between pantheons. That's a significant responsibility, Hera noted. Speaking for the first time. Mediation between pantheons is delicate work, but perfectly aligned with his domain and demonstrated abilities, Athena countered. Who better to maintain harmony between divine traditions than one who stands outside all of them? Naruto felt the weight of these expectations settling on him. Back in Konoha, he had dreamed of becoming Hokage, leading his village and earning everyone's recognition. Now he found himself with divine recognition but an entirely different kind of responsibility, maintaining balance between forces he was only beginning to understand. I'll do my best, he promised simply. Though I'd appreciate guidance on the politics and protocols. Where I come from, we handle things differently. Apollo will instruct you in divine etiquette, Zeus decreed, ignoring his son's delighted grin and Artemis's pained expression. And Hermes will familiarize you with the various pantheons and their territories. The messenger god gave Naruto a friendly salute from his throne. Looking forward to it, new guy. Always nice to have fresh blood around here. Zeus raised his hand, indicating the matter was concluded. Now, to the prisoner. Athena, Hecate, you will conduct the interrogation. Extract everything he knows about Kronos' attempts to breach dimensional barriers and any accomplices who remain at large. The sorcerer, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, finally spoke, his voice hoarse but defiant. The Crooked One sees across worlds now. He knows of the Biju, of the power they represent. This is just the beginning. A collective chill ran through the hall at these words. Naruto felt Kurama stir within him, the fox's anger flaring at the implication that Kronos might target the tailed beasts. Let them try, Kurama growled. They'll find we're not so easily manipulated. Zeus's expression darkened again, lightning crackling more intensely in his beard. Take him away. We will. Discuss countermeasures once we have more information. As guards appeared to escort the prisoner, Zeus addressed the full council once more. This session is adjourned. We will reconvene when Athena and Hecate complete their investigation. In the meantime, all gods are to be vigilant for signs of dimensional disturbances within their domains. The gods began to vanish from their thrones, some in flashes of light, others dissolving into mist or flame. Soon, only a handful remained. Artemis and her hunters, Apollo waiting expectantly, Hermes checking what appeared to be a divine smartphone, and Hestia tending her hearth. Apollo bounded over to Naruto, shrinking to human size as he approached. So, Rumi, ready for the grand tour of Olympus? I know all the best spots. Divine hot tubs, ambrosia tastings, muse concerts. Apollo, Artemis said with exasperated affection, perhaps allow our new colleague to settle in before overwhelming him with your idea of divine culture. The sun god pouted dramatically. Fine, but I call dibs on first proper hangout. It's been centuries since we had a new god who wasn't a stuffy minor deity of doorknobs or something. Despite the serious events of the day, Naruto found himself smiling at Apollo's infectious enthusiasm. There was something refreshingly straightforward about the sun god's personality that reminded him a bit of Lee or Kiba. I'd like to see my accommodations first, Naruto said diplomatically. It's been a long day of dimensional sealing and council politics. I'll show you to ethers. I mean, your chambers, Hermes offered. Finally looking up from his device. Got to pass that way to deliver these divine memos anyway. Artemis nodded to her hunters. Talia, Phoebe, return to the hunt and inform them of these developments. I will join you shortly after discussing some matters with our new ally. As the others dispersed, Artemis gestured for Naruto to walk with her toward the grand doors of the council hall. Outside, Olympus stretched before them, a gleaming city of marble and gold, impossibly beautiful and utterly alien to Naruto's sensibilities. You handled yourself well, the goddess said as they walked, both in battle and in council. Thanks to your guidance, Naruto replied sincerely. And for suggesting Mount Hood. I appreciate the recommendation. Artemis nodded. The location suits you, and having you stationed there provides additional security for a dimensionally significant site. Practical for all involved. They stopped at a balcony overlooking the divine city, the mortal world. Visible far below through breaks in the clouds. For a moment, they stood in companionable silence, the goddess of the hunt and the newly recognized god of balance. The sorcerer's words about the Biju, Artemis finally said. They concern you deeply. It wasn't a question. Naruto nodded, gazing out at the horizon. The tailed beasts have been used as weapons before, by people who saw them only as sources of power. It led to war, suffering, deaths on an enormous scale. The thought of someone like Kronos learning about them and attempting to harness their power. He shook his head. It can't happen. Then it seems your appointment as god of balance was indeed the work of fate, Artemis observed. You stand at the crossroads between worlds, uniquely positioned to prevent such exploitation. If I can figure out how, Naruto said, a hint of his old uncertainty creeping into his voice. Being recognized as a god is one thing, but actually knowing what to do with that recognition is another. Artemis turned to face him, her silver eyes ancient and knowing. You continue to think like a mortal, defining your path step by step, day by day. Gods must learn to think in broader patterns, decades, centuries. The gradual unfolding of purpose across time. That doesn't come naturally to me, Naruto admitted. I've always been about immediate action, changing things through direct effort. And yet your greatest achievements came from persistent influence over time, the goddess countered. You did not change the shinobi world in a day, from what you've told us. You shifted perceptions gradually, built alliances across years, planted seeds of change that eventually blossomed. Naruto considered this perspective, surprised by how accurately Artemis had assessed his life's work. You're right, he acknowledged. I just never thought of it that way. Divine perspective, she said with a small smile. You'll develop it, in time. And perhaps teach the rest of us something in return. She gestured toward where Hermes was waiting discreetly at a respectful distance. Go, settle into your new home. Rest. The challenges ahead will require all your strength and wisdom. Naruto bowed slightly to the goddess. Thank you, Lady Artemis. For everything. We are peers now, god of balance, she reminded him. Artemis will suffice, with a nod to Hermes indicating she was finished. The goddess transformed into a silver deer and bounded away across the divine cityscape, quickly disappearing from view. Hermes approached with a friendly grin. Ready for the grand tour. I'll give you the express version. Busy schedule today, messages to deliver to 7 pantheons before sunset. As they walked through the gleaming streets of Olympus, Naruto reflected on how far he'd come from washing up on Camp Half-Blood's beach just days ago. He was now a recognized god with an official domain, divine chambers on Olympus, and earthly territory, and responsibilities that spanned dimensions. Not bad for a few days' work, Kurama commented, his mental voice tinged with amusement. From village pariah to Hokage candidate to interdimensional deity. You never take the simple path, do you, Kit? Would be boring that way, Naruto replied silently, echoing their earlier exchange. But beneath the light banter, both Jinchuriki and Biju felt the weight of the sorcerer's words. If Kronos had indeed seen across worlds, and learned of the tailed beasts, a new and dangerous chapter was beginning. One that threatened not just this world, but the shinobi world as well. Naruto's path as the god of balance and harmony was just beginning, and already the scales were tipping toward chaos. But if there was one thing Uzumaki Naruto had never done, it was back down from a chale. NGE, especially when those he cared about were threatened. Divine or mortal, shinobi or god, some things never changed. Mount Hood rose majestically against the Oregon sky, its snow-capped peak gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. Naruto stood on a rocky outcropping halfway up the mountain's eastern slope, surveying what was now officially his earthly domain. Below him stretched a hidden valley, invisible to mortal eyes thanks to a combination of natural mist and divine concealment. Ancient trees, some over 1,000 years old, formed a protective ring around meadows where wildflowers bloomed regardless of season. A series of interconnected pools fed by hot springs created a natural network that resembled a massive seal formation when viewed from above, with steady flows maintaining perfect equilibrium throughout the system. Not bad, Kurama assessed. Reminds me a bit of Mount Myoboku, but with its own character. Powerful natural energy here too. Naruto nodded in agreement. It feels right. Balanced between forest and mountain, water and stone, hidden yet accessible. In the week since the Olympian Council had officially recognized him, Naruto had divided his time betway. N. Apollo's crash course in Divine Living 101 inches heavy on partying, light on actual divine responsibilities, Hermes' whirlwind tours of Pantheon borders conducted at literal god speed and establishing this place as his own. Unlike his modest Olympian chambers, which he'd kept simple despite Apollo's horror at his minimalist aesthetic, this valley offered space to create something that truly reflected his nature and purpose. With help from his shadow clones and guidance from his divine instincts, he had begun shaping the valley into a harmonious blend of his old world and new. A traditional torii gate marked the main entrance, flanked by 2 stone foxes with 9 tails. The central clearing contained a replica of the Hokage monument, though instead of faces, the stone wall bore Simbo. LS representing the balance between opposing forces, light and darkness, chaos and order, creation and destruction. A small cottage built in a style that combined traditional Japanese elements with IFIC Northwest materials stood near a meditation pond, providing shelter though, as Apollo had cheerfully informed him, gods didn't technically need to sleep. Still feels weird not getting tired, Naruto commented to Kurama as he descended into the valley. Or hungry, unless I want to be. You still eat more ramen than any self-respecting deity should, the fox replied dryly. Some habits transcend godhood, apparently. Naruto grinned. Hey, I officially declared it the divine food of balance. Apollo backed me up on that. Apollo would back you up on declaring dirty socks divine if it ain't adding another drinking buddy to his collection. Naruto couldn't argue with that assessment. The sun god had made it his personal mission to introduce Naruto to the perks of divinity, which apparently included everything from ambrosia tasting parties to chariot racing through mortal fireworks displays. They can't see us at night if we're quick. As Naruto reached the valley floor, he sensed a familiar presence approaching, not through normal means, but via the dimensional current that now connected various divine locations in his awareness. A flash of silver light heralded Artemis's arrival, the goddess materializing near the meditation pond in her teenage form. Your domain takes shape nicely, she observed, glancing around the valley with approval. You've balanced the influences of your origin world with elements of this one. That's the idea, Naruto replied, genuinely pleased by her assessment. A bridge between worlds, in a way. Artemis nodded, then got straight to business, a trait Naruto had come to appreciate about the hunting goddess. The council has completed interrogating the sorcerer. Athena asked me to brief you on their findings, given our prior involvement in the matter. They walked together toward the cottage, where Naruto had prepared an outdoor seating area beside a small fire pit. Though gods didn't need warmth, fire still provided a focal point for conversation. Some divine habits apparently transcended pantheons. What did they learn? Naruto asked once they were seated. The sorcerer's name is Alabaster Torrington, a demigod son of Hecate who fought on Kronos' side during the Titan War, Artemis began. After Kronos' defeat, he continued working in secret to restore his master, eventually discovering texts referencing dimensional convergence points. Like the one in Vermont, Naruto noted. Artemis nodded. He was monitoring several such sites when your arrival created a surge of dimensional energy unlike anything he'd ever detected. He reported this to remaining Titan loyalists, who interpreted it as an opportunity. But how does Kronos factor in if he was defeated? Naruto asked. Percy explained that his E was scattered so thoroughly that reformation should be impossible for centuries. That remains partially true, Artemis confirmed. But according to Alabaster, fragments of Kronos' consciousness have coalesced in the void between dimensions, a space he called the crossroads of worlds. Neither fully destroyed nor truly alive, but aware enough to influence sensitive individuals across dimensional boundaries. Like a psychic echo, Naruto mused, remembering similar phenomena from his world. Not physically present, but able to project influence under certain conditions. Precisely. Alab. Aster claims Kronos' remnant can occasionally glimpse other realities from this position, including yours. During one such vision, he witnessed the power of the tailed beasts and became fixated on them as potential vessels for his reformation. Naruto felt Kurama's anger flare within him. The Biju aren't power batteries for megalomaniacal titans to exploit, he said, his voice hardening. Are sentient beings with their own wills and rights. A perspective most gods here would find unusual, Artemis noted. But one consistent with your established character. She continued her report. The ritual at the convergence was intended to thin the dimensional barrier enough for Kronos to send a portion of his consciousness through, not to your world directly, but to an intermediary plane, where he believed he could contact the Biju. It wouldn't have worked, Naruto said with certainty. The Biju would never align themselves with someone like Kronos. They've had enough of being manipulated and used as weapons. Perhaps. But even failed attempts to breach dimensional barriers can cause significant damage to the fabric of reality. Artemis fixed him with her silver gaze. Is why the council has assigned you your first official divine mission. Naruto straightened, sensing the importance of this moment. I'm listening. You are to locate and secure all major diamonds. Ional convergence points within our territorial influence, the goddess explained. Establish protections similar to what you created in Vermont, but tailored to each site's unique properties. Hermetic permanent seals, essentially. With you as the keyholder. Makes sense, Naruto agreed. How many are we talking about? 12 confirmed sites of significant power, plus potentially dozens of minor nexus points. Hermes has the complete list and coordinates. Artemis reached into a silver pouch at her belt, withdrawing what appeared to be a small crystal sphere. This will help you map the dimensional currents between sites. It was created by Hephaestus based on Athena's designs, drawing on observations of your sealing technique. Naruto accepted the crystal, feeling it respond to his divine energy. Within its depths, faint lines of golden light began to form, creating a three-dimensional map of energy flows across the country. There's more, Artemis continued. While securing these sites, you were also authorized to establish a detection network for dimensional incursions. The first line of defense against any further attempts to breach the barriers between worlds. Basically, making me the divine border patrol for interdimensional threats, Naruto summarized. A hint of a smile touched Artemis's lips. An apt description, if somewhat lacking in divine gravitas. But yes, essentially, Naruto considered the magnitude of this assignment. It was logical given his domain and abilities, but also represented significant trust from the council, especially for a newly recognized god with foreign origins. I'll need help, he decided. Not just for the physical work. My shadow clones can handle that, but for understanding the unique properties of each convergence point. Might have historical or cultural significance I'm not familiar with. Artemis nodded approvingly. A wise assessment. The council anticipated this need. You are authorized to request assistance any god whose domain overlaps with a particular convergence point. Additionally, she hesitated briefly. I have instructed Talia to make the hunt available to you as needed. Their tracking abilities and knowledge of remote wilderness areas will prove useful. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this unprecedented offer. That's generous, especially given the hunt's usual policy on male company. It is practical, Artemis corrected, though without her usual sharpness. And you have earned a measure of trust that few males ever achieve with the hunt. Do not squander it. I won't, Naruto promised sincerely. They discussed tactical details for a while longer. Priority sites, potential complications, communication protocols. As the conversation wound down, Artemis glanced toward the replica Hokage monument with curiosity. You maintain strong connections to your origin world, she observed. Not just in aesthetics, but in your approach to godhood itself. Most who ascend to divinity gradually distance themselves from mortal perspectives. Naruto followed her gaze to the stone wall with its balanced symbols. Maybe that's part of why I was chosen for this role. To bring something errant to the pantheon, a bridge between divine and mortal understanding, just like I bridge dimensions. Perhaps, Artemis acknowledged, though it may also become your greatest challenge. Gods who remain too attached to mortal concerns often suffer for it. I'll take that risk, Naruto said firmly. My connections, to people, to places, to principles, they're not weaknesses. They're what give me purpose and strength. Something like respect flickered in the goddess's ancient eyes. A bold position. Time will test its wisdom. She rose gracefully. I must return to my hunt. They track UAL monster movements in the Rockies that may be connected to our dimensional concerns. Thank you for bringing this mission personally, Naruto said, standing as well. And for your continued guidance. It means a lot, especially coming from someone with your experience. Artemis studied him for a moment longer. You are an unusual god, Naruto Uzumaki. But perhaps that is precisely what this moment in history requires. With a nod of farewell, she transformed into a silver hawk and soared upward, quickly disappearing against the mountain sky. Left alone in his valley, Naruto took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his new responsibility settling onto his shoulders. Securing dimensional boundaries across an entire continent would be no small task, even with divine powers and shadow clone assistance. Back to work already, Kurama observed. These gods don't believe in extended orientation periods, do they? Would you have it any other way? Naruto asked with a grin. Sitting around Olympus listening to Apollo's party stories would get old fast. True, the fox conceded. And this mission aligns perfectly with our interests. Securing the boundaries protects both worlds from threats like Kronos while potentially revealing more about the connections between dimensions. Exactly. Naruto pulled out the crystal sphere, watching as the golden lines within it grew more defined. Mapping invisible currents of energy across reality. And who knows, maybe one of these convergence points will offer a clue about communicating with home. The possibility sent a surge of hope through him. Though he had accepted his role in this world, the desire to contact his friends in Konoha remained strong. Not necessarily to return permanently, he understood the responsibilities he carried, but to let them know he was alive, to share what had happened, to maintain the bonds that defined him. One step at a time, Kurama advised. First, we secure the boundaries. Then we explore what lies between them. Naruto nodded, his resolve strengthening. Tomorrow he would begin this new mission, starting with the convergence point nearest to Mount Hood, a sea cave on the Oregon coast where, according to Hermes' briefing, the boundaries between worlds rippled like water during certain tidal conditions. Tonight, though, he would prepare properly. Unlike many gods who relied solely on their innate power, Naruto still valued the shinobi disciplines of planning, preparation, and adaptability. He created a dozen shadow clones, assigning them to various preparatory tasks, studying maps, gathering supplies, developing modified sealing techniques for different environmental conditions. As his clones scattered throughout the valley, Naruto himself climbed to the highest point. A flat stone outcropping overlooking both his domain and the wider world beyond. There, he sat cross-legged and entered sage mode, extending his awareness to the fullest. The natural energy of this world flowed differently than in his home dimension, carrying echoes of divine influence and ancient power. But beneath those differences, the fundamental principles remained the same: balance, harmony. The eternal dance between opposing forces that created the rich tapestry of existence. In this meditative state, with his consciousness expanded beyond normal limits, Naruto felt something new, a faint resonance. Like a distant voice calling across an immeasurable void. It wasn't clear enough to identify, just a familiar vibration that tugged at his awareness. Someone's searching, Kurama observed. Just as we suspected at the convergence. The question is, are they searching specifically for you, or simply probing the boundaries between worlds? Either way, Naruto replied silently. It means the connection isn't completely severed. There's still hope. He remained in deep meditation until the stars emerged overhead, the celestial patterns so different from those he had grown up with, yet beautiful in their own right. A new sky for a new life, but with threads connecting to the old one, balance in all things. Tomorrow, the god of balance and harmony would begin his first official divine mission. But tonight, Naruto Uzumaki remembered who he had been, honored what he had become, and looked forward to what he might yet achieve in this world that had chosen him for reasons still unfolding. In the valley below, his shadow clones worked in perfect coordination, their shared purpose a reflection of their creator's resolute spirit. And in the sky above, a shooting star traced a golden path across the darkness. Perhaps a coincidence, or perhaps a sign that even the cosmos recognized the arrival of a new divine force, one that would bring balance not just between this world and others, but within the very pantheon that had accepted him into their ancient order. For the first time since arriving in this strange new reality, Naruto felt truly at peace with his transformation. Not just a shinobi, not just a god, but something unique, a bridge between worlds, traditions, and understandings. The path ahead would not be easy, but he would walk it with the same determinatio. And that had carried him from orphaned outcast to respected hero to divine guardian. After all, that was his ninja way, in this world or any other. Chapter 2 End.